Afternoon, folks. I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School. And what I thought we'd do today is we did a video a couple weeks ago or last week about setting up a colder weather camp. I won't say cold weather. We don't live in Minnesota. Colder weather camp. And we set up a hammock and tarp, underquilt, overquilt, and those type of things to spend a night in the woods while we're out hunting, scouting, whatever we plan to do, or just recreating in the outdoors in cooler weather. What I thought we'd do today is talk about spike camps, set up a spike camp, and talk about how to camp with under 30 pounds on your back in cold weather on the ground, colder weather. All right, let me caveat that right off the bat, colder weather. You know, it might get down below 30 tonight, but it's not going to get, minus 30 or minus 40. So cold weather is definitely subject to where you live. In Ohio, when it gets down close to, that teen mark, you're only going to get that for about a month out of the year. So most of your cold weather in Ohio is going to be in the 30s or high 20s. So that's what I plan on when I pack out a winter pack, are those temperatures. And I can easily handle that with what I've got on my back, which weighs less than 30 pounds. And we'll talk about that as we go. So the first thing we should talk about in this video is, what is a spike camp? What's the purpose of a spike camp? And really, what you're doing with a spike camp is you're moving to an area that is much closer to the game you want to hunt, or just outside the boundaries of the area you want to hunt, so that you're not spooking the game the next morning driving or walking in. You're already in close proximity to that game. So a spike camp is just a very temporary, overnight, maybe two, but mostly likely just overnight camp, away from a base camp, possibly away from your home, away from the wall tent that's halfway across the property. And now we're further out into the property, but we're in an area that we want to hunt in the morning. We don't want to spook the game tonight. So we're going to set up a quick spike camp to camp here for the night. And it's going to be very minimalistic as far as the things that we're carrying. However, we do want to make sure of one thing. No matter how we camp, we want to make sure that we get a good night's sleep, especially if we plan to hunt all day the next day, because that good night's sleep is the most important thing any woodsman can get. Don't fool yourself or get fooled by anyone else thinking that you need to take minimal sleep gear into the woods for an overnighter in colder weather, because all that's doing is asking to get a minimal night's sleep or have to have a big fire to control the heat that you can't trap with proper bedding, okay? So we're gonna talk about all that today. We're gonna talk about how to do that at well under 30 pounds. So stay with me. All right, so I've got an area here between two trees that's long enough for me to string up a tarp and long enough for my body. So this is where we're going to string up our overnight shelter with what we have in the backpack. All right, so let's get started. All right, so very much like the last time, we've just hung our pack up here on a tree, one of the trees that we're going to use for our shelter system. And now we can work from this pack and not have to bend over every time we want to get in and out of it. And we can pull it down to stuff it with things, because you'll notice when we start pulling things out of this pack, I stuff as much as possible. I don't like to use separate bags and pouches for things that take up room and leave dead airspace in the pack when I can stuff the thing, okay? That's an important part of this. The other important thing to remember with this is that even with that less than 30 pounds, we have an absolutely full complement of tools here. Really, the only thing that you're sacrificing out of this pack for a spike camp, in my mind, is not as much food and possibly not as much water, because you're only going to be there temporarily for one night. So you want a good sleep system, a quick meal that you don't have to have a fire necessarily to consume, because starting a fire in this area can just spook the game, and that's what we're trying not to do. So not having a fire is important for something like that in a spike camp if you can avoid it. So we're going to use an alcohol stove. We'll talk about that later on and why as well. So we got our pack hung up. Let's start getting our camp set up. All right, so we'll go through this whole pack as we go. For now, let's just get the top of it opened up here so we know what we're doing first, okay? Now, in the very top of this pack, I've got one package of food and an alcohol stove and some fuel. All right, this is what I'm going to eat with tonight. And I've got my canteen on the front down here, okay? I put that there so I get ready access to it on the trail if I wanted to eat before I stopped. Okay, it's not a big deal. But the first thing in the top of this pack should be the first thing that you need. So what I've got in here, I've got my stakes, my rope. This is my pillow bag. which I'll stuff later on with my jacket and my tarp. Okay? So we'll get the tarp out first. We've got a ridge line in here. We're ready to start setting up. So all I'm going to do right here, I've got this extra prusik I'm not using. I've got this extra toggle I'm not using. So all I'm going to do is, with the middle of this tarp, just to kind of keep things centered up, I'm going to run this toggle right through that prusik loop, just like this, to trap it. And then I'm just going to pull this taut, and that's going to kind of hold that tarp in the middle, okay? Keep it flopping around. All right, so in this stake bag, I've got a roll of bank line here. And if I don't want to cut that bank line necessarily, and I only need a piece of it, then I can just pull that off the roll, tie it where I need it, and leave it on the roll and roll it back up when I'm done. Even though this is kind of my expendable cordage, I don't like just cutting it for no reason if I don't have to and I can recover it. I can't think of anything else I'm going to need cordage for after I get this shelter up. So if I only need the one piece, I might as well leave it on the roll. All right, so we made our trucker's hitch loop pretty big here. Now we can tighten this down to draw out our shelter. Pinch them together. We've got some slack here. So now we're just going to come over the top, pull a loop through like we normally would, just like this. Tighten that down. We'll back it up with another, just a fairly loose half hitch right there, just like that. And then we've still got our line attached to our reel. All we have to do is open up this loop and stick it inside there, just like this. It's not going to go anywhere. We can even wind it up tight if we want to on there, just like that, okay? And now, when we leave, we can recover all of this cordage, and we have taken care of its needed purpose, but not wasted any of it. All right, so we got a pretty big area inside our shelter now. The next thing we're gonna grab is, I've got a sheet of Tyvek over here on the side of this pack, tucked in behind my saw. This Tyvek doesn't weigh anything, all right? Now I can lay this on the ground underneath the shelter. If I'm going to use a blow-up mattress of some kind or something like that, I don't have to worry so much about anything on the ground punching holes in that mattress per se. And I'm not going to have a fire because I'm making a spike camp. If I were making a fire, I'd make it far enough away I wouldn't have to worry about things popping into my shelter. If I'm worried about embers popping into my shelter and putting a hole in an air mattress, what do you think it's going to do to a sleeping bag or a whoopee or a swagman roll? It's going to do the same thing, right? So that's really not an excuse not to carry a good mattress that has a high R value, especially in cold weather, because that's the key to a comfortable night's sleep, is really to battle conduction from the ground if you're sleeping on the ground, right? We talked about that under quilt to battle convection when we slept in the air. On the ground, your biggest enemy is going to be conduction from the ground. And a high R value, something that's at least 4 in the wintertime to 5, is going to be your best bet, okay? Something that's, less than 2 is not going to cut it for very long. So we're going to put this piece of Tyvek on the ground. We'll put our air mattress on top of that. Now's the time to kind of feel around in here and see if there's anything that's going to potentially poke through anything or be uncomfortable in the middle of the night. Lay down on this piece of Tyvek before you get your bedding on it and make sure that it's going to be comfortable to lay on. Make sure that the direction you chose to sleep is going to be okay. Make sure you're not going downhill so water's going to run down to you all night long. And then tuck that Tyvek in so it's not outside your shelter collecting rain if it does rain, okay? So the next thing in that pack is a North Peak Gear air mattress. First time I've ever used this air mattress. Now, is it a good idea to go out and use a piece of gear for the first time in an overnight scenario? Probably not. However, I know if I had to, I could get through the night out here, no matter what, even if something were to happen to this or it didn't work the way I think it's supposed to. So I'm going to go ahead and try it out. It's supposed to be fairly bulletproof. That's why I chose to review it and work with it, because I need something that's small and packable compared to the Pathfinder air mattress, which is completely bulletproof, brass valves, whole 9 yards. But you need conveyance to carry something like that, or you're gonna have a long roll on your back, whereas this is almost the size of a water bottle. So we're gonna try this thing and see how it works out today. It's supposed to have its own inflating device built in. It looks like it comes with a patch. It comes with a bag and it comes with a strap. Again, it rolls up to about the size of a water bottle. It's brown on one side and black on the other, or gray on the other. So let's undo this bad boy and see where the pump's at on it. It's supposed to have a thing where you can pump it up by hand. And I assume that's right here. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. We'll get it out and we'll get this thing blown up and we'll look at it. Now the other thing this Tyvek does for you is it keeps you off the ground if the ground is wet when you're working in your camp. Now, the way this works is you open this valve up and you just press down and that sucks air back into it. It's a one-way valve. So when you're pushing, it's going into the mattress. When you let off of it, it's filling the chamber with air. Now you can also get on this back side here and open this relief valve. And you can, it's a one-way valve as well. You have to open it all the way up to dump the air out. So you can actually open this up and use an electric pump if you want to, like a zero pump, FlexTail zero pump, or you can just blow air into it. The problem with blowing mattresses up by hand or by breath is that you do have moisture coming out of your mouth that gets in the mattress. And if you got any kind of a downfill in there or any kind of an insulation, over time that stuff can grow mildew and things like that on it. So it's not recommended that you necessarily blow these up by mouth. This one doesn't have anything inside of it, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. All right, give ourselves a minute to recover and breathe and get back after it. All right, we got it blown up and we even got kind of a pillow side on it here on one end where the opposite end of the fill valve is. It's got kind of a pillow end. This thing is supposed to be pretty impervious to puncturing, so I'm gonna lay all over this thing, I don't care. Let's see what happens here. See if I'm comfortable in this bad boy or not. Well, pretty good. Not too bad. Yeah, not too shabby. Okay, I'm happy with that. Like I said, I'm not too worried about rolling around on it. It's supposed to be pretty puncture resistant. I've seen them driving trucks over this bad boy, so we'll find out. You know, I still struggle every day with kits and things like that because I'm such a traditional guy. I mean, I just love traditional stuff. I love the traditionalism of the woods. And so it's difficult for me sometimes to mix modern gear in with my traditional stuff. I do it all the time and I do it well, I think, over the years, but I keep falling back, heavy flannel shirts. This scarf right here, honestly, is probably one of my favorite pieces of kit since the colder weather started to come in. And it's a wool and silk blend, but it's stretchy. So it can do all of the first aid functions that you talk about with things like wraps, if you need it to. But it's also very warm because it's a wool blend. It's simple enough you can wear it around your waist if you need to trap body heat underneath outerwear and things like that. But I can just throw this thing around my neck in a quick tie and throw it inside my shirt. And it keeps my core warm right there. And it also, keeps heat from escaping through my neck. And then I can just loosen it up if I need to, if I get overheated. But, and I don't sell this thing at all. This is sold by Nathan Lodgen & Co. It's really a piece of like 1920s gear, but I just absolutely love it. And the other thing that I've bought from Nathan lately that I've been using a lot are these handkerchiefs, these cotton, old school block printed handkerchiefs. And this thing has got some red in it. I like it really well. It matches the things that I wear. It's nice, soft cotton material. It's 100% cotton. So it can be used for all of those things as well that we talk about with 100% cotton, first aid, fire, all those kind of things it can be used for. It's great for just grabbing something hot off the fire real fast or blowing your nose into or wiping your tail end with if you have to. But it's just a great piece of kit. Shove it in your pocket, forget it's even there. And when you need a rag around camp, you got it. Simple things like that are very traditional, I can't get away from them. It's very, very difficult for me. So when I do modern stuff like this and I'm trying to cut pack weight down and use modern materials for things, it becomes a challenge for me to kind of figure out what's the happy medium, what's the balance, you know. But I've come up with a kit in this video that I've got some very traditional gear and I've got some very modern gear, and I've dropped that kit down below 30 pounds. So it's very easy to hump around the woods. If you wanted to walk a good distance from a base camp to a spike camp, it's easy enough to do with this kit. And one thing I did here, back in the back of this tarp, is I left the last grommet. I staked up one grommet. That gives me a flap right here that's completely waterproof because the tarp's folded right there. And that's where I can lay my lever gun at night, so it's ready access, but it's completely waterproof. It's not going to get rained on in case it rains tonight. It's going to stay dry, and I can put my other gear that I want to stay dry, like my shoes and things like that, can go right there as well. Now, inside this pack, in the belly of this pack, there's only two more things, right? I've got a bag of dry clothes in here, like I said, pair of underwear, pair of darn tough socks, a light pair of base layers, minus 33, and a sleep cap. I take that no matter what, no matter what, no matter what, because wet clothes will get you in trouble quick. Dry clothes will take care of the problem, okay? So that's in there. And then the only other thing that's in there, besides that, is my Wiggy's Freedom Shelter light bag. And I'm not gonna pull it out of the pack until I'm ready to bed down for the night, but that is the only other thing that's inside this pack. So you had the Wiggy's sleeping bag, you had the air mattress, you had the clothes bag, you had the tarp, and you had the steak and rope bag, right? Everything else, and then you had food and your stove, all right? We'll talk about that in a little bit. Other than that, everything's on the outside of the pack pretty much, and there's really not that much here. I mean, you've got a shovel, you got a sit pad, you've got a tourniquet, you got the end reach. On the other side, you've got a silky saw, and it's a big boy. Between the saw and my knife, there's not a whole lot I can't do to process wood, and I've got a pocket knife in my pocket and a shovel if I absolutely have to have it to bust off limbs and things like that. I can use a shovel for that in this kind of weather if I need to, all right? Other than that, you know, the top of the pack, the brain, contains anything that I need ready access to. Hygiene kit, headlight kit, fire starting, navigation, those things are all right here in the top of the brain. And then I have a canteen set right here on the back. There's a canteen and a cup. The spoon's actually in the brain of the pack as well. And I have 4 packages of coffee on there. So I'm good to go at way under 30 pounds. All right, so again, really the whole idea of a spike camp is to get into an area close to where you want to hunt and not spook the game by camping fairly stealthily and definitely not having a big rip-roaring fire. So we're gonna camp tonight right here, and we're going to cook on an alcohol stove instead of making a fire. You get into colder weather, isobutane sucks. It's just that simple. So you need a liquid fuel that's going to burn well for you in cold weather, and alcohol and white gas are the kings for that. Alcohol is just a small, easy package to carry. So if all you're gonna do is make coffee and a just add water meal, an alcohol stove is small, it's easy to pack, and it's plenty to do those things with, and it doesn't put off a lot of odor into the surrounding area where you plan to hunt anyway. Like I said, the only thing that's left in the bucket of this pack is that sleeping bag, that Wiggy sleeping bag. I put my clothes back in there, and I put a couple things back in there to keep them dry until tonight. Food, things like that are in there, so I can just pull them back out when I'm ready. Canteen on the outside with some coffee. First aid pouch on the bottom. This has got my complete IFAK in it. I like the things that I want to get to right away. If there's something I want right now, I want it on the outside readily available. That's what this pouch on the bottom of this Pathfinder Scout Pack was really made for, was for something you feel like you need right away that won't fit in the brain. So I keep my first aid stuff in here, not only for myself, but for students when I'm teaching, okay? And then, of course, you got tools on the outside. So we've got the silky saw there that we talked about earlier. We've got the shovel on this side and a sit pad on this side. Now, let's talk about what I call the brain, okay? And also on the outside, we already talked about, we have a tourniquet, we have our Garmin. Now, the top pocket or the brain of this pack, what I call kind of the junk drawer area of the pack. This is where I put stuff that I want to get to right away. So I just jammed a spoon in there. I had my strap right here that's around the tree with a toggle on it, my utility cord, to hang my pack off of. It was right here, tucked in with this spoon, right here in the front, okay, in this little area right here below the zipper. Then you've got a couple simple things here. You've got one pouch that's a headlight, battery, charging cable, Pathfinder headlight. We've talked about that in lots of other videos, okay? You have on the other side of that, the hygiene kit. I went over this hygiene kit in a video before. A very simple, small hygiene kit for use in the woods. Then I have this small zipper pouch here. That's all navigation. It's got a map of the area in it. It's got a notebook, a pen, and a compass. And then the rest of it is just fire starting implements. You've got a good 6-inch ferro rod in there with a good heavy duty tungsten striker on it. This is the Pathfinder rod here, and a Bic lighter. Makes it very, very simple, okay? So I just shove those in the very front. I put that ditty bag next to that. Headlight, hygiene kit right beside that. Spoon and toggle cord in the front. Zip it up, and I can get to that stuff immediately if I need it, as well as first aid supplies are on the outside of the pouch. Everything else goes inside because it's mostly shelter or food that I'm not going to need immediately. So when I pack this pack, it's always first in, last out. So the sleeping bag's at the bottom all the time, tarp's at the top all the time. That way I know when I open this pack up and grab something out of the top of it, it's going to be my tarp or shelter system is going to be up there first. Usually I put the food and the spare clothes underneath that. It's not hard to move that tarp out of the way to get to those items, but the tarp is generally the first thing I'm going to grab out of here. You know, I've always said that if the majority of the bulk and weight of my pack is sleep gear, I'm okay with that. And I figured out at about 2/3 of the weight of my pack. Now, once you start to get away from things like wool blankets, get away from things like oilskin tarps, you dramatically reduce that ratio. So now you're probably looking at in this pack, 40% shelter, 40% tools, and 20% being food and water as far as the total weight goes. All right, so we weighed this pack with food, with water, as I took it off my back. And I'm going to show you how much it weighs because it's probably going to shock you. But it's under 25 pounds with food for one night, with water. We'll just sit out here and watch the woods as the sun goes down and drink a cup of coffee. all is well. This is what life's all about right here. No question about it. You know, from the very beginning of making videos on YouTube, I've always been an advocate of just sitting in the woods and observing. And I've got this whole area in front of me here that some of it's an area I squirrel hunt quite a bit. And camp is facing that. No fire to distract me at all. I can see every little thing out here right now. And this is the perfect time to just study the woods. And I can tell you that that takes time. It takes dirt time. It's not something you get once a week going out to shoot a YouTube video. You got to spend time in the woods to learn to be a good woodsman. I filled that alcohol stove up right before I boiled that water for that coffee. That thing is still almost full. So if you're only boiling a little bit of water at a time to make coffee or soup or whatever you're doing, that alcohol stove, you fill it up one time, it's probably going to last you, a couple days in the woods. I always recommend to people to keep their stove in a plastic bag if it's got fuel in it. You can see this one's full of fuel, and it's definitely not leaking at all. But you just never know what's going to happen. I always try to keep mine in a plastic bag when I put it in my pack. And then if it leaks, it's going to leak into this plastic bag and nowhere else. This alcohol stove kit's absolutely simple as can be. You've got the multi-fire, multi-tool stand that goes on about any alcohol stove. Got your alcohol stove. You got a clear bottle of fuel and a windscreen in here just in case. It's a very, very simple kit. Doesn't take up a lot of real estate to pack. But for camping in cold weather when isobutane is not a thing, that's a nice little kit to carry around with you to cook with. Make your gear work together, right? This is the bag that I keep my stakes and my rope in. It's the same bag I use for a pillow. I stuff in a piece of outerwear, not like the shirt I was wearing. I gotta tell you, I've been wearing these Jim Green boots for, I don't know, week and a half now. Man, oh man, absolutely love these things. They look traditional, made in South Africa. Man, they are just great boots. I mean, the leather in these things is amazing. And it's just a great pair of woods boots for sure. All right, really nothing to do now but tuck into the old wiggies and wait till morning. Hope for a good hunt. Definitely cooling down, but boy, this Wiggy's bag is so warm. I love this thing. All right, we'll see y'all in the morning. Well, don't know how much hunting we're gonna be doing this morning. It rained pretty good last night. Of course, that's good cover in the leaves for walking and hunting. But I'm not sure if it's gonna rain more or not. So we'll just get a cup of coffee and wait it out. Well, ain't time for dry shoes this morning. But I'll tell you what, it rained good last night. Hadn't put those dudes back there in that backside where that flap was folded under. I definitely have wet boots this morning for sure. Man. Well, it rained pretty good last night, no question about that. But that's part of camping, right? Sometimes you get a little soggy. I stayed dry, clothes stayed dry. Got a little water on the front of this Tyvek sheet where some water came in, but because I was on this mattress, I was good to go. So other than that, I'm dry and that's what counts. I guess we'll get some coffee and see what happens from there. But I don't know how long this video is already, but I'm gonna go ahead and thank you now for your views. Thank you for your support. Thank you for watching my videos. Tell you I appreciate everything you do for my school, for my family, for my business, all of my sponsors, instructors, affiliates, partners, and friends. And in case you don't get any further than this, I'll see you guys on the next video. Thanks.